Scenes live streaming service. Hello and welcome back. This is the latest on Hurricane Dorian on our screen right now, progressing towards the northwest away from Puerto Rico and the US Virgin Islands. It is a hurricane and an intensifying one at that. 80-mile-an-hour winds right now, a pressure of 990 millibars, verified by Recon. A SATID estimate, Force 13's satellite estimating tool, got 88 miles an hour from Dorian in the last hour, and if that maintains for another 2 hours, then we might put it up to 90 on our analysis. But at the minute, we're sticking with what the National Hurricane Center is saying, 80 mile an hour winds and that pressure of 990 millibars. My name's Nathan Foy, into our 5th hour, live hour of coverage here, and we will continue for some time yet. At least for this hour, who knows how much longer after that. I'm joined in this hour by David, Orlando, Sam, Ryan, and Justin, who is joining us for the first time tonight.
Glad to be
Good
here.
to be here, Nathan, and Split has
Good evening.
Good evening.
Well, Ryan's come back after a little while, so let's talk to you first, if you don't mind. What do you think about the storm? Any better, or is it leveling off right now?
That's a good question. It's hard to tell. I think it might still be intensifying just because the pressure dropped, but again, I don't really know.
Let's look at some more satellite imagery. Here it is again. If you're able to see this right now, anyone in the team, what's actually been going on there? There's some convection or some cloud cover there on the northern side of the eye that's sort of drifting over the eye, and now we're seeing the eye start to come out a little bit more in those latest frames again. Let's just see if we can get... There it is. Just a quick temperature estimate. It will be quite low. About minus 41 in the eye at the moment. But it looks like it's about to pop out again. So let's not forget that a low eye temperature doesn't necessarily mean that it isn't there, just that it could be partially or completely cloud covered.
It appears that it's covered because the hurricane, where Dorian is trying to wrap the whole entire convection around the eye, so maybe that is a very plausible and good reason as to why the eye is currently cloud covered.
And there it goes. Well, again, as has been the case in the last few hours, if you've got any comments or questions for us whilst we're on the air tonight, here's your chance to get in touch and ask some questions and see if we can together come up with some answers. A question here from Barbara: what is the width of this storm? It depends exactly how you measure it, but let's just look at the previous imagery again. So you can see on the left hand side there the leading edge really of that convection band. That's what we're going to measure. From the left hand side up there, largest point across is probably somewhere down here to the eastern convection that's really blowing up in those latest frames. That's 145 miles right there. So that's a 145 mile diameter. From the eye, the largest radius in any direction is to the north, about, pushing up 110 miles due north now, where that convection is blowing up. Now, strong winds of tropical storm force or higher could extend outside of that convective burst, but it's more likely to be higher inside the convection with stronger gusts. David, any news?
Very quiet on the face.
Yes.
And the Twitter feed.
Okay, well, we caught a little bit of that. Sounds like the connection went down without a trace. Let's get the latest from the National Hurricane Center. If you missed the intermediate advisory, which came out an hour ago at 8 p.m., it's now just after 9 p.m. Eastern Time this evening. Just before we do that, I'm just going to update the bar on our left-hand side. You'll see some new wind probabilities on our left-hand bar in a short while. So, from the National Hurricane Center, as of 8 p.m., 19.2 north, 65.7 degrees west. As that imagery fails to load there as well, I'll come back to the previous one. That makes it 60 miles north-northeast of San Juan. It'll be a little bit more than that now. It had 80-mile-an-hour winds, that's 130 kilometers an hour, moving northwest at 13 miles per hour with a minimum central pressure of 990 millibars, that's 29.23 inches of mercury. The hurricane warnings that were in effect, and the hurricane watch and the tropical storm warning, all the warnings that were in effect were discontinued at 8 p.m. And so there were no coastal watches or warnings in effect. Hurricane hunters were in the storm, and are they still in the storm now?
Believe they still are.
I think 12 is. 12
Yep.
should still be in there.
Yeah,
Alright.
12 is still in there. Not sure about 11. No, 11 is
finished.
left this.
Right.
Yeah, 11 is finished.
So, rainfall expectations. This is added rainfall on top of what has already occurred. Northern Leeward Islands, 1 to 3 inches. Central and northwestern Bahamas, 2 to 4 inches, isolated amounts of 6. Coastal sections of the southeast United States, 4 to 8 inches, isolated amounts to 10. In a moment, I'm just going to take a look. Well, first of all, there is another depiction of the wind probabilities from Dorian, so I'll leave that on the screen for just a moment or two whilst I take a look at the latest GFS model to see what they're saying for rain now. Earlier today, the GFS model was saying that Dorian would produce at least 12 inches of rainfall to the coast of Florida. Now, let's just have a quick look. Just looking now as to what the expectations are. This is in the next 5 days only. And the total rainfall is actually looking very much the same as what earlier forecasts were saying. Up to 5 days, albeit, we're still talking about 12 inches of rain. Now, if we were to speculate beyond 5 days, then you might be looking more towards maybe 14, maybe even getting towards 16 at a worst case. As it enters, the GFS thinks it will make landfall in northern Florida and be just inland when it enters Georgia. So whether that happens or not still remains to be seen. Other models taking it much more squarely towards the coast of Florida, so much so that it goes straight through and into the Gulf of Mexico. And the National Hurricane Center is sort of siding with that on that update. They were doing another update with a new forecast track cone, and intensities on that forecast track will have changed as well. That update comes out in just less than 2 hours. Would anyone like to raise anything right now?
Yes, actually, I would like to answer a question. There have been a few questions since I've got here that have asked if the storm will be like Katrina. For all the viewers out there right now, I would say don't focus on a really bad prediction. Even though the European model brings it out to the Gulf of Mexico, that's still over 192 hours away. And even though the European model is quite accurate, it's still a model and anything can go wrong. So I wouldn't really pay attention to the 168 hours plus.
And if
but
you
pay
want to
attention
see
more to the 5-bit
another,
cone.
if you want to see another really bad prediction, there it is, the HWRF. Another
yes,
look at the
HWRF.
18Z model run that came out recently is predicting a Category 5.
Please
Great job,
disregard
HWRF.
that model.
No, it shouldn't be disregarded. It actually could happen, but we're not saying that
It's possible, but according to, I'm looking at Tropical Tidbits 00Z intensity guidance, most of the reliable ones, including the ship model, continues to bring it around low Cat 3. There's a few extras out there like the HWRF that bring it to Cat 4 to Cat 5, but majority of the models currently still bring it around Cat 3.
And for the record, that's what I agree with at the moment too. But if it keeps intensifying, whether it is or not, that's another question. But if it is intensifying still, and it could be getting towards Category 2 status, then these models will have to catch up and they'll have to change.
I'm looking at I was looking at the radar link recently, and the high resolution, the southwestern quadrant, the Eyewall has improved quite massively. I've sent a screenshot in. I'm not sure if you've seen that.
Here it is on the screen now. There's a look at a recent radar image. Still has a gap there, a significant gap in the southeast. But it's really starting to come together. When we were looking at imagery 2 or 3 hours ago, it had about half an eye wall, and now you can quite confidently say it's got 3/4 of an eye wall. So pretty soon we could be looking at a whole eye wall and more intensification.
Yeah, I was initially my initial forecast was going to be a high-end Cat 2, low-end Cat 3, near central, around between central and northeast Florida. Do you think that's kind of an underestimate at this point?
I agree, especially considering how quickly the inner core got organized.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's still organizing and still strengthening and deepening. So.
Yes. But I wouldn't say it would go. But in the more extreme case, I would say like it's very unlikely to pull something like what Michael did, right?
Better not.
Well, what do you mean by Michael exactly?
As in it'll strengthen to, as it could strengthen to potential Category 5 all the way up to landfall.
I don't think that's going to happen. No, because sea surface temperatures, once you get closer to the coast of Florida, they're lower than what they are in the Gulf Stream.
Yeah.
That and the ocean depth gets shallower, so there's a better chance of like upwelling and stuff that happens.
Yeah, and that also needs to be taken into account as well.
Just to show you again the National Hurricane Center's track forecast before it changes in just less than 2 hours. That's what it's looking like at the moment. What we will quite clearly see is maybe a slight shift towards the north on at least the initial track of Dorian, because it is moving north of the forecast point. And that could bring more northerly landfall. At the minute, the cone is very wide, about 400 miles wide on day 5. So that means the storm could make landfall anywhere from what looks like, I think it's Key Largo, the furthest up, isn't it? All the way to central Georgia.
Nathan, a couple of comments.
Yes.
Updates. I think my signal's okay now.
Yes.
National Weather Service, Charleston, while tracking Dorian, don't overlook the risk of tidal flooding throughout the weekend. The potential for major coastal flooding continues to increase. Thursday, Saturday, coastal flood watches or warnings are likely each day with the evening high tide. And Walmart store in North Tampa is now out of water.
Gosh.
So that's a Walmart store in North Tampa.
So the shelves are very much emptying.
Yes.
Ethan, are you here?
I sure am.
Welcome back. Any new thoughts that you've gathered?
Well, the storm has continued to rapidly intensify.
You think it is rapid?
Yes, I think it is. And
What was
by the
its
looks of it,
pressure? What was its pressure 12 hours ago? That's my question.
I think 1,005 millibars.
Yeah, I think it would be then, because the threshold is at least like 1 millibar per hour dropping in a period of 24 hours. So it's unofficial, but yeah, it's deepening quite rapidly.
We've got
And
a recent
the
image.
radar presentation.
The eye is
The
coming
radar
back
presentation
out.
is once again stunning.
The eye is coming back out, and we've got a new image that has the eye temperature reaching the highest so far, -13. We'll get that on the screen for you very shortly. Just a reminder what that actually means. A higher temperature in the eye means that on the satellite pictures we can see much further down. Obviously the satellite only picks up the cloud tops, so the fact that we can see right down to where the temperatures are into the positives, as it may be, if the storm gets stronger, then that means that the eye is rather deep, if not reaching the whole ground, the water. And if it's got cloud tops to match, then it's a very strong storm. We're about to show that imagery in just a moment. Well, somewhere. There is some imagery of the storm reappearing, the eye reappearing there. Radar tells the story better, but still that convection blowing up as well, even though the imagery is a bit glitchy here. The northwestern side blowing up some -75-degree cloud tops by the looks of things, which is pretty intense as well.
It looks like, from my time to chime in for a moment, but basically, the latest pass from reconnaissance flight shows that they lost a portion of data while moving into the center, and so I guess we have to wait for another passing to get anything out of it.
Well, that's no good.
Yep.
A question, is there any models picking up potential... Oh, it was retracted. Potential Atlantic systems next week. Well, the ECMWF was on board, wasn't it? I don't know if it still is.
Yeah, 2 Cape Verde storms coming in around 2:40, I think, at the 2:40 hour.
Yeah.
So that's like 10 days out, though.
Mm-hmm.
It's hinting, but it's nothing we can really follow here at the moment.
Anything
Super
within
outstanding.
7 days we tend to treat as believable. The GFS actually does have a weak system near the Cape Verde Islands before day 7. Should be enough for the NHC to tag it as a potential area of development. Those who are looking out beyond Dorian, which I'm not sure why you would be doing that at this point, but...
No. I mean, all focus right now should be on Dorian, especially for those living in any of the southeast states that could be in the storm's path.
And there is an animated GIF of a recent section of radar imagery showing exactly the process of Dorian's Eyewall construction at this stage.
It's looking pretty impressive.
Certainly is.
We do have a question here that I found. we've had multiple questions pop up like this, asking if there are two eyes forming, if there's an eyewall replacement cycle. Anyone want to take a stab at that?
Well, the radar imagery shows you quite
No, I will
conclusively that
replace
there aren't two eyes.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no eyewall replacement cycle coming up.
Doesn't
It's
look
more like
like
it's
it.
trying to form an eye than trying to replace its eye.
Yes, it would seem so. And just looking at the ECMWF as well, long range, it does predict a system to form in early September that moves through the Cape Verde Islands and beyond. I'm just checking to see that actually. So it actually has Dorian surviving, takes it way into the, you know something, the ECMWF 12, it's the first time I've actually looked at this, it is quite old now, but it does take the closest thing to a Katrina track that I've seen from any of the models so far. Landfall just about in Florida near the Alabama border as a very significant hurricane. That is a possibility.
If anything, it reminds me a little more of Andrew.
Well, I
Then-
suppose
Yeah,
so.
I was about to say that. I mean, what the ECMWF is showing right
Yeah,
now,
Andrew.
I mean, it almost looks exactly like Andrew past, I don't know, days after the 72-hour mark. It's almost exactly like Andrew, except that it, of course, is recurves in the Gulf earlier, and it ends up hitting the Alabama-Florida border and not Louisiana.
That and Dorian is in a Cat 5 when it makes landfall in Miami.
No, it won't. It won't.
It won't, yeah. Well, hopefully it won't.
So here's some more imagery of that eye coming back out again. Quite impressive imagery. Let's just get that one of the latest images. No? It's like processing issues. I'll try and get that latest image for you at some point and we can see what the eye's doing. In the meantime, we'll throw it back to these images here.
Just want to point out, I have provided imagery, from water vapor imagery, and I'm seeing that it's the dry air is really starting to become less prevalent around Dorian. The moisture is really starting to pick up on all sides as it's intensifying.
Certainly looks that
Some
way.
of those dry air gaps are starting to fill in there.
Alright, let's get some more questions. Does the HWRF usually show much stronger storms than reality? Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
Would anyone
usually
recommend...
like to overestimate things.
Would anyone
I-
recommend radar scope? Is a question we receive.
I definitely would. I've been an owner of radar scope since May, I want to say, and I don't regret buying it at all. It is one of the best $10 that you will ever spend in your life, I think.
Is there a possibility of a low-end Category 4 at any point? Absolutely. Could be very soon if it really starts to intensify here.
What I will say to the HWRF question, I have noticed that the HWRF tends to go 20 knots higher than the actual intensity. That's what I have noticed.
If I had to
So
compare
if-
the H... Go ahead.
So if the current model is to be believed of 145 knots, and we're looking at 125 knots in reality.
That's still pretty dangerous.
Certainly.
You know, if I had to compare the HWRF model, I would compare it to the Renaissance missions in the Western Pacific in the 40s through the 60s, how they always overestimated the intensity.
Yeah, still struggling with this imagery at the minute. What I can tell you is that the eye is continuing to appear in the last 20 minutes or so.
storm is certainly a big threat to Florida. Is there any rainfall forecasted totals? I haven't heard anything from
Yes,
rainfall yet.
they're talking about isolated amounts of 10 inches, but I think it's going to be higher than that, 12 inches plus.
Anything for the West Coast?
Well, that is still a grey area at the moment. A very big grey area, because we don't even know if the storm will reach the western coast of Florida still.
A lot of the models do want it to reach the West Coast, though, so it could happen.
It does. How big do we see the storm getting? Well, as I said earlier on in tonight's stream, that it could well go to about 1.5 times its current size before landfall. That's what we're currently thinking.
We do have a question from Sky Cycle. He's asking if Dorian will hit sub 950. I would say there's a good possibility, but no guarantees.
I think that's. I would probably say that's. Yeah, I'd say maybe like 50-50 for sub 950, did you say?
Yeah, sub 950.
Yeah, I'd say about 50-50.
I mean, we've seen weirder hurricanes like Isidore in 2002. It hit a pressure of 934 as a Category 3. So, I mean, anything can really happen.
Depends who you go by.
Exactly.
Because there's definitely evidence to back up Isidore being a Cat 4.
Oh, for sure. I don't think a Cat 3 has a pressure of 934. That is very far-fetched.
I don't really want to bring it up, but Sandy nearly got that.
Sandy hit 940, I think.
940 millibar Category 1. Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's 940. Yeah, that was.
Well, it was huge though.
Okay, guys. More imagery. False alarm. The eye is disappearing again. Those latest imageries there. Only a little box, but you can see how the eye goes again after it first appears. So it looks like it's toying with us at the moment.
The radar looks like it's improving slightly.
Well, that is typical for a hurricane like Dorian as it's intensifying, though.
Let's get a radar image instead then. As Orlando was pointing out, there it is. It is looking much better on radar too. The heaviest area of the rainfall looking to be now towards the western side, towards the southwestern side. Still got that gap there, which is now on the eastern side. I'm not really sure what's happening there in the northeast. Question here, is Erin still dead? Yes. When you die, you don't come back, Erin.
Yeah, I think it's pretty close to turning post-tropical.
They have got rid of it, haven't they? Yeah. ATCF has got rid of it.
Oh, so it is post-tropical, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Another question from King of Prussia, possibility that it stalls over the southeastern USA like Florence. I would say there's a chance, but it's not guaranteed. Again, the only major model that does that is a GFS. Basically, every other single model brings it out into the Gulf. So be prepared, but it's kind of like a half and half right now.
Yeah, I mean, it could go into the Gulf, or it could, curve up north, hit the Carolinas, and it would probably be slower if it, of course, curved north and hit the, other parts of the southeastern U.S.
Something else that I should also point out once again, it is moving further north than forecast at the moment. Latest frames show it moving maybe even north-northwest for the time being, which would take it quite significantly east of the first forecast point that you see on the screen here. That would mean overall perhaps a more northerly track, but then again, some models have been trending for a further north initial track, only to go further south in the end game when it hits Florida.
I think that's only a temporary thing, though, because Dorian is still trying to form its eye, and it seems like the center is still trying to kind of centralize a little bit. So maybe that's why the track is really wobbly.
Well, we're just looking out to see whether there's a trend in that. Over a 6-hour period, I would call it a trend if it continues for another 2 hours.
Well, for now, it seems more temporary than anything.
Yes, everything's temporary, but it could change that forecast track by a few miles, and it could make all the difference for someone and for someone else getting into and out of major hurricane conditions when it comes to that landfall.
Very much so. Let's see. Another question from we had one from Mikey. Well, he made more of an observation asking if the track would be like Andrew. Again, it's out of the 5-day cone, so there's no guarantees, but some of the models, like the European model, do take it very similar to Andrew's track.
Yes. We're just trying to get some of that imagery working properly. Not really cooperating though. So we'll go back to the other... actually, something we could show you that shows it off quite well is this. The Navy imagery, which shows what the storm looked like a little bit earlier now. That's actually quite a while ago. But I just thought that would be interesting to show how clear the eye was at that point. And it probably still is now. Let's go back. Just in case you wanted to know, Podul is there as well. That thing does exist too. A weak tropical storm in the South China Sea. We want to mention it twice in 5.5 hours. But there it is. And looking like it's getting partially exposed now. So that one is really struggling and is likely to weaken to a tropical depression before striking Vietnam. Now, interesting comparison we can make here. HWRF wanted this to be a Category 4. And it's a minimal tropical storm at peak. So, the same HWRF wants a Category 5 out of Dorian. Well, different, comparing apples to oranges a little bit, I suppose, but... that's just what you're getting with the HWRF.
Yes, to all the people in the chat right now and the 210 people watching, I would say be very wary of the HWRF. It has very much overestimated many of the storms this year, so I would be a little bit wary of their predictions.
But hey, model of the year 2017.
Yeah,
and then
I'd also like
really
to
turned awful.
Yeah. I mean, I'd really like to say that, when you're looking at model data, you have to, proceed with caution. You have to know that sometimes models can go a bit crazy or, that kind of stuff. You have to, really, I think the best thing to use for, forecast, if you want the forecast of where this hurricane is going to go and how
how does
strong
it
it's
do
going
for
to
track?
Well, for track, I mean, I think there is a pretty good consensus from what I've seen.
Yeah, the lone outlier is the GFS still, kind of like the HWRF in intensity.
Yeah, but basically, just don't get too carried away with models is basically what all I'm trying to say.
I read some Fox asked this several times. He asked if there should be any concern for the west coast of Florida, because apparently there's no information for that side of the NHC. So any thoughts on that?
The west coast?
So like Tampa Bay, for example.
So like Tampa, well, I mean, it really does depend on where the storm tracks. I mean, you probably, you'll see some heavy rain, some gusty winds.
Do you think storm surge will be an issue?
I I don't think so. It'll probably
You don't?
have weakened because it'd be on the other
On the
side of
other side, yeah.
Florida. Yeah, it'd be on.
I would kind of second that because it really storm surge does depend on wind direction and how organized this storm is, because you can have, I would say that you can have like you still have a good amount of wind spinning around, and like on the south side it's gonna blow in water from the
Yeah,
Gulf side.
and it also positioning where the storm center is will also really be a big factor to that too. But honestly, since it'll have weakened because it'd be interacting and going over Florida, it wouldn't be too bad of an issue. Definitely not, major surge. Like, it's not gonna be like, 10, 15 feet. Like, no, it might be like closer to like 5 feet at worst. At least that's what I think.
You can see our wind probabilities on the left-hand side of your screen there. A lot of places getting towards 80% now in Florida. Let me read out the official percentages, though, from the National Hurricane Center, which will probably be just a little bit different. And I've read this out earlier, but those who missed it, I'll do it again. Percentage chances following locations: Florence, South Carolina 3%, Columbia 4, Little River 3, Myrtle Beach 6, Georgetown, South Carolina 6, Charleston 10, Beaufort 14, Atlanta, Georgia 4, Augusta 7, Savannah 18, Kings Bay 35, Waycross 27, Mayport, Florida 47, Jacksonville 41, Gainesville 52, Daytona Beach 65, The Villages 63, Orlando 71, Cocoa Beach 84%, Patrick Air Force Base 77, Fort Pierce 85, West Palm Beach 76, Fort Lauderdale 65, Miami, Florida 48% chance of tropical storm force winds, Homestead 42, Marathon 33, Key West 28, Naples 48, Fort Myers 54, Venice 57, Tampa 62, Sedekee 58, Tallahassee 24, St. Mark's 29, Apalachicola 30, Panama City 22, Destin 13. Also to point out that they are also expecting. Yes.
What do you have for what do you have in terms of percentages for Jacksonville and Savannah, Georgia?
Savannah was at 18% and Jacksonville at 41%. But also to point out, Cocoa Beach and Fort Pierce both at 35% chance of hurricane force winds as well.
We got a few more questions.
So that's certainly
and
interesting.
There's been an explosion of questions, so we'll try to answer them as best as possible, guys. There was one question that I saw here. I don't know where it was, but someone asked if a pinhole eye was forming, and I know it was mentioned in the Discord a few hours ago. Personally, I don't think so, but it's hard to tell because the eye hasn't really formed yet, so it's really hard to tell on if it's going to be a pinhole, a donut annular hurricane eye, a regular eye. It's really hard to tell, especially this early into its intensification stage.
I don't foresee pinhole at the minute.
Yeah, pinhole, if I'm not mistaken, that's more commonly associated with really fast deepening storms. Like Wilma had a pinhole eye, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. It's got a small eye, but it's a small storm. So,
Very so.
In relation to its size, I don't think we could call it pinhole, even if it's only 5 miles wide.
Mm-hmm. There's another question from Stephen Allen. Will the high pressure system to the north move the storm more directly west or a tad more north? What is more likely? I would say if you're paying attention to the models, if I'm not mistaken, all of them except for the CMC model takes it west into Florida. So based off the consensus of the models, I would say that there's a decent chance or a good chance that it'll hit Florida, if not Georgia, if you're paying attention more to the GFS model. But no, if you're asking if the storm is going to recurve out to sea, there's pretty much a 0 chance at this point. What else? Storm surge. Someone asked storm surge on the eastern coast of Florida instead of the western coast. Any thoughts on that?
Well, it could be potentially very large. It could
Very
be
much
big.
so.
I don't know what. I mean, when I think about this, I think about precedent. What other storms had similar tracks? Well, I suppose
Andrew
you would sort of look towards
Andrew
maybe Gene.
and Francis, I think, and
or
Gene.
Yeah, the 2004 storms, to see maybe what surge did they produce. I don't know if anyone knows the answer to that.
We had a few people ask if it can become a Category 5 again.
Ask
Very-
the HWRF if you want the answer to be yes.
Well, I
Yes,
don't know.
the HWRF or the COTI. Those are the only two models right now that bring it even close to Category 5.
CHP6.
I just
Moving
want
on.
to point out. I just want to point out that so far today, Dorian has dropped at an average of 4 millibars per hour.
That is very
God.
impressive.
What? 4 millibars per hour?
Thanks for that. Nathan, I have a news item.
Yes, go ahead.
WSYX ABC6 is reporting that some military aircraft from Florida will be evacuating to central Ohio tomorrow.
Ah,
Where are they in Florida, do we know?
I'll just check the link out.
Sorry, who was this that's evacuating Florida again?
Military planes. The Rickenbacker Air National Guard Base are evacuating all U.S. Navy aircraft.
oh, looks like the
No,
military learned
correction,
this lesson from.
So
Pinhole.
they will be heading from Florida to the Air National Guard Base in, what did I say?
Ohio.
Yeah, and it's the U.S. Naval Wing 11 station in Jacksonville, Florida,
Right.
beginning tomorrow. The 121 First Air Refueling Ring base at Rickenbacker keeps the National Disaster Plan to support hurricane evacuations.
It seems like the military learned its lesson from Michael.
Yeah, well, still fresh in the memory indeed.
Mm-hmm.
As we look again at more of this imagery, the eye completely disappearing underneath that convection again. That doesn't mean to say that it's gone and died a death, because radar will tell you that it's a completely different story. The eye is underneath.
There's a
all of
question that connects with that, actually, Nathan. NM asked if the eye being folded
Nelson.
is an indicator that a stronger eye may emerge. Do you think that's true?
Well, I don't. Not necessarily. It could mean anything. We just don't know. But from radar indications, it is looking very good. And certainly in this instance, it probably is intensifying under there.
And Nathan, just thinking about the lightning in the hurricane, what does that really represent? And we're coming into the overnight hours.
We are.
And what, when you hear and cite reports read lightning in a system, what message do we get out of that?
Well, some people say it is an indicator of strengthening. I'm just going to see if we can get some of that lightning imagery now, or something along those lines. I don't think so. Anything there? No. Okay, so we don't have that at the moment, but That was what some people were reporting earlier, that there is significant lightning in the storm.
I'm just thinking if there's any satellite imagery that we could probably source later.
Yeah, it has been detecting some flashes. But I'm not in a position to be able to say with much detail whether that has an impact or not.
We got a few extra questions. Someone is asking if the GFS shows that it'll hit New Orleans. No, that would be the European model that takes it a little bit closer to New Orleans. And there was one other question that I saw. Someone asked what model was it that brought Dorian to a Cat 5. That would be the HWRF model.
They'll be getting a lot of hits tonight.
It seems like people are really attracted to the more intense models without realizing that it's probably not realistic.
No. A comment there, HWRF is a clown fest. Great. Lovely comment. Quite amusing, actually. The eye completely underneath that cloud now. This is pretty much real-time imagery updates pretty much every minute. The latest image on this is that last little bit there was just 2 minutes ago. It's great to have imagery that's so up-to-date all the time here. And this is the very latest. We're on the front line here with Hurricane Dorian. It is still around 4 days away from reaching the coast of Florida, and it could slow down before it gets there as well. We don't know whether that will happen or not yet. It's still a very uncertain situation, especially when we get towards the Florida landfall, unfortunately. Everywhere up to that point is not too difficult to forecast. But it's all about the strength of this ridge and whether it will weaken and the storm will move further north and maybe do a bit of a Matthew, or whether it will stay strong and push the storm into central Florida, or even, as one or two models are trying to take it, a little bit closer to southern Florida.
That brings us to a question. There is a question asked by John Mills asking if there is a stark contrast between the European and the American models. To answer that question, yes, there is. I don't know the logistics of it, but I think the American model, the GFS, is hydrostatic, and the European is more altitude-based. So, historically, the European model has done significantly better in terms of tracking, in terms of track forecast. For example, Sandy, the European model predicted that 7 days out, and then with Joaquin in 2015, the European model was the only one to predict that it would go out to sea, which it did. So historically, yes, the European model has been more accurate, but the American model just got upgraded this year, so we'll have to see how it performs this year.
And so far, any thoughts?
On Dorian?
On the GFS performance?
Well, I mean, this is going to be the test, because currently the GFS is the only model that shows a landfall in Jacksonville and then stalls it over Georgia, while all the other models, including the European model, take it out through the Ghost after cutting straight through Florida and kind of taking a track like Andrew. So there's two different outcomes, and we'll see which one ends up on top.
Well, unless it goes somewhere in between.
It basically puts the cone of uncertainty throughout all of Florida. So, regardless of where this is going to track, a good majority of Florida is going to see a wide range of impacts from Dorian. It really depends on where the greatest impacts are going to be felt.
Very much so.
Alright, we're coming up not too far away from the end of another hour here as we continue to track Dorian. If you've got any more questions, start your message with Force13 all in text. David, are we still streaming to Facebook?
Yes, doing this very healthy, and I appreciate the support to the
Of course.
stream. So we're here to provide the information.
Absolutely, and we hope we have been providing a good service tonight. As always, we do our very best here, and if you want to show your support, you can do it in many different ways, including accessing any of the links underneath our videos. And of course, we have a Discord server as well if you'd like to take part in the discussion with other storm trackers or weather people in general, to be honest,
And including the boss.
and including Australian weather
members.
as well.
Oh, yes.
And anywhere
keep
around the
a close
world.
eye on that one.
Indeed. Okay, great. Question: once Dorian reaches the Gulf of Mexico, will it move north or south? North. Most likely,
North,
if not
probably. I don't think it's going to keep going west and hit southern Texas. That's almost...
No.
I would highly doubt
Damn it.
that's going to happen.
No,
Mm,
and you
very
got to
southern.
remember that it's usually storms, hurricanes are steered by high pressure systems, and occasionally other low pressure systems where they would do a Fuji. There's a bit of a Fujiwara. Yes. Yes, thank you.
You're welcome. However, I'll need to break in. It is being reported a major weather event in Texas, severe thunderstorm. I'm just waiting for damage, but I believe it has been very intense.
Wow.
Somewhere
Where?
in Texas.
We don't know where.
No, I'll have to go on a searching exercise for it.
Okay. Well, somewhere in Texas. That's the news right
Yeah,
now.
somewhere. I'll come back to you.
So again, we're left with the National Hurricane Center track forecast map showing what's expected over the next 5 days. They think it's going to be a major hurricane with winds of 115 miles per hour as it approaches the coast of Florida this weekend. It will pass just north of the Bahamas before striking somewhere along the east coast of Florida, we think. Then, who knows what will happen afterwards? If you follow that NHC track, it could end up in the Gulf of Mexico. Quite a significant part of that Day 5 cone is in the Gulf of Mexico, but we really don't know at this point. The storm is moving a little bit further north than what was forecasted for the first 12-hour period from the last forecast. The National Hurricane Center will be providing a new forecast map, graphics, and information in about an hour's time, and we'll be here to pick it up for you and we can discuss the latest. After that, we will be turning in for the night here at Force 13 HQ. Most likely we'll keep the stream running with the graphics package on its own, which will show you the latest information automatically updating. So that will continue through the night tonight.
And Nathan, I'm going to do it again. Incredible video. Severe thunderstorm hit downtown Houston earlier.
Really?
Between large skyscrapers. The wind can often be faster due to the wind tunnel effect. And somebody said, I wouldn't be surprised if these winds were 70 miles per hour plus. And I'm just checking for another earlier report.
All right, we'll look into that since we're not doing anything else right now here at Force 13 HQ. Let's see what we've got. We're multitasking now. There isn't much to talk about with Dorian right now.
Well, while we're doing that, could I answer like a question that I found real quickly?
Well, I've got the information here now.
Okay, then let's go through with it then.
Revolving doors at 1 Allen Center, 500 Dallas Street in Houston, blown in and shattered. That occurred not too long ago, about 5 hours. 3, the other way, 3.5 hours ago. Also in South Houston, large tree down and fence damaged in Montrose, and that was at about That was about 2 hours ago. No, I'm wrong again. 3 hours ago, exactly. So there were some wind reports in the area. Go ahead.
Okay. So, again, we have seen a few questions asking if Dorian will hit Category 5. Again, I will say there is a chance, because a chance is a chance at like 1%, but it is highly unlikely. If you are thinking that it is going to hit a Category 5, you are probably paying attention to the HWRF model, which unfortunately has performed very poorly this year. So I would not focus on that, especially because that is the lone outlier in terms of intensity wise. Most of the more historically accurate models, such as the ship's model, have placed it around low to mid Category 3. So what I would say to people who are saying Cat 5, I would say there's a chance, but it's very slim at the moment. If somehow Dorian gets more organized overnight, then yes, we could probably be talking a little bit more about Category 4 or 5. But at the moment, since it's only 80 miles an hour and the recon has not said anything stronger than 90 miles an hour, I would say no, do not focus at the moment at a Cat 5.
Yeah, certainly not. Major hurricane would seem to be bad enough.
Exactly. Cat 3 is already as bad as it is, so...
A question there, a late question.
Yeah.
Will 13W, which is obviously called Puddle now, become a typhoon? I can quite categorically say at this point, it won't. It looks dreadful.
Unless you're the HWRF model.
Yeah, well, wanted a category. What does it mean when there's a significant amount of thunderstorms in a hurricane? It really depends. Depends how organised they are. If they're organised, it's a sure sign of intensification, and we're seeing quite a bit of that in Dorian this evening. We're taking a short break here at Force 13 HQ as we reach 10 PM Eastern Time. In an hour's time, the National Hurricane Center will update, and we'll take that live for you here. And yeah, keep it right here, and we'll have more satellite updates as well, and try and make sense of what's going on with this storm and produce the best forecast possible. Back in a few. Coverage continues in a moment. You can also help the project become even better by becoming a patron. You can see more information about all the benefits involved by visiting patreon.com/Force13. With a special thanks to these people for being our most valued patrons this month. You can also check out our growing merch store so you can show Force 13's colours wherever you go. You can also find a link to our Discord server underneath this video in the description. You're watching Force 13's live streaming service. Hurricane Dorian continues to capture the attention of everyone who has any interest in tropical meteorology as it continues to approach, well, it isn't really approaching just yet, but leaves the Lesser Antilles and the Caribbean region behind, enters the open Atlantic, and is on its way to the northern Bahamas and towards Florida. It could strike as a major hurricane. The National Hurricane Center is currently predicting that 115 mile an hour Category 3 landfall is on the cards according to their forecast. This could change in an hour's time when they release their next forecast advisory. They could raise it given how the storm has looked in recent frames. We think it's intensifying quite significantly right now. I haven't seen radar recently, so maybe someone could bring that up in a little while. My name's Nathan Foy. I'm joined again in this 6 hour of coverage by our team, consisting of this hour of Ethan, David, Orlando, Sam, and Justin.
Good evening.
Good
Hello
evening,
to you
everyone.
all.
Good to be here.
Good evening. I'm pulling up radar right now.
You're doing
And
what?
Nathan,
Oh, the radar.
Radar.
the CBS for Miami as Hurricane Dorian churns Fort Lauderdale is now preparing for king tides. And the Florida Division of Emergency Management is now advising residents should have 7 days of supplies in preparation of the hurricane. A stocked supply kit has water, non-perishable food, etc., prescription medications, flashlights, extra batteries, and I believe there is a marine notice to
Oh my god. Okay.
shipping.
What is it?
Wow, it looks
We
this
have
stuff
some
has
unfortunate
really
news.
intensified already. Oh god.
What are we talking about now?
We have
Let
some
me pull it up on.
The hurricane.
we have some unfortunate news. We have confirmed 1 fatality already from Dorian in Puerto Rico. An elderly man has been reported as dead in Puerto Rico as a result of flooding.
Oh, was it a flood?
Well,
a
now
flood
it's a deadly
death?
storm.
Yep, 1 fatality so far.
The flooding
Oh,
has
there'll
been
be more
bad
to
down
come.
there.
Let's be real here.
All right,
Yes.
well, that is...
That is a seriously underestimated hazard that is associated with hurricanes. You do not mess around with floodwaters. And
back
most
to-
flood deaths do occur in vehicles as well. So turn around,
Yeah,
make sure
that's
turn
also
around,
true.
don't drown when you're. Yeah.
So here is some more radar imagery showing how the storm's been looking in the last few frames, I assume it is. Yes, that's quite late, in the last 10 minutes. What are our thoughts on this? There still appears to be a gap there in the southeast.
Can we put that down to dry air?
Yep.
I suppose so, because when you look now at the when you look at the satellite imagery, dry air's still having a hold on it.
Yeah,
And
but
that's been the
considering
case
that-
for a few days now, hasn't it?
Yes, but I think considering that the center is now centralized and kind of has an inner core, very soon, probably overnight, dry air will have like no effect on this storm at all.
This area
Unless it
here
somehow sneaks
is
in there.
quite a bit dry out of that southeastern part of the storm, and it's going to have to deal with that.
And Nathan, I hate to do it, but DMM News is reporting that Georgia is to open its emergency operations center at noon tomorrow.
Georgia, do you
Recon
say?
has almost.
Yes.
Recon has found winds near 85 knots in the northeastern Eyewall at the surface.
Whoa. Really?
That's about
That's
I
100 miles
believe
an
that's
hour, I think.
100 miles an hour.
At the
85
surface?
knots is 100 miles.
Yes, at the surface.
Wow.
Actually,
That is
that's
some
just
big news
short.
if real.
It's 97.
Yeah, but
97 miles
the
an
NHC rounds up on those. They don't do 95. They do 100, I think.
And Nathan, NBC6 South Florida is reporting that the minimal central pressure in Dorian is, well, we know it's dropping, but the pressure has dropped about 20 millibars lower than what the Hurricane Hunter aircraft were finding yesterday.
Oh God.
Yes.
The pressure is likely down near 985 millibars around.
Yep, that's what I'm signing the social media.
It is interesting, though, considering that it could possibly be a Cat 2 unofficially. 985 is unusually high for a storm of that strength.
Well, maybe not, because it is still in the process of intensifying. The pressure will
That is
catch up,
true.
I assume. But still, the radar presentation has been excellent all evening. Satellite presentation not looking so good now, I must say. A shadow of what it was an hour ago. I think dry air. It looks like dry air to me that's really lingering on that eastern side. Blowing up further east there. The eye is embedded in that convective burst to the left-hand side, of course. Although it is fading a little bit, that convection, so goodness knows what happens next. But they're recording, if that is true, 85 knot winds, 100 mile an hour winds at the surface, according to Recon. That is very big news. And the National
What would that
Hurricane
translate to
Center.
actual wind speeds?
If it's, well, what was the? You just said it was at surface though.
Yeah, would that be the actual wind speed?
Yeah.
If it's 1 minute sustained.
If it's flight level, they typically do 90% of that, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, don't they do 10-second wind speeds?
True, they do 10 seconds wind speed, yes.
So it's going to be a little bit less than that, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
So I think they might run with 90 miles per hour at the update then.
That's what I'm thinking too.
And that is coming up within the next 50 minutes. Maybe they'll do it early. Sometimes they do. As soon as we find out what the latest is from the National Hurricane Center, we'll let you know. Let's run back to some other imagery now on the screen. There's some more Ghost 16 of Hurricane Dorian. And that has been its progress in the last 6 hours or so. That's how long we've been streaming as well. So we've pretty much been there for the whole loop of that imagery now. If you've got any comments or questions in this hour, you can send us a message on the YouTube chat and on Facebook. Type in Force 13. It will tag us nice, big and bright on the YouTube chat. And we can get on to answering any questions that you've got. So
we do have one.
Yes.
Since it's the beginning, there was a question asking, is Dorian doing better than expected? And I'm sure we covered this last
Yes.
hour, but we might as well answer it again. Any thoughts?
It absolutely is, in my opinion. If it's 90 miles per hour now, then it is way ahead of schedule. What was the last National Hurricane Center forecast? Is what I
It's
want
not
to know.
good.
The last National Hurricane Center forecast had it reaching 90 miles per hour Tomorrow afternoon.
In 24 hours.
Thursday afternoon. So if it's reached 90 miles per hour late on Wednesday evening, then it is way ahead. Again, that is unconfirmed at the minute, and we'll see what the National Hurricane Center say at the update at 11 p.m. But that is pretty much what this hour is about, the waiting game. But in the meantime, if you do have any questions about the storm, we can do our best to answer. 985 millibars, is that what you guys said earlier on the recon?
I think that's what we said.
Back up
About there.
a bit.
Someone wants to show the latest spaghetti models. We can do that actually if we just scroll back here through these panels. Eventually you'll reach Hurricane Dorian. This was as of 6 p.m. UTC. The later graphic, the 0 UTC graphic, will appear in probably about an hour. But that's what it said recently, and there was
Nathan,
decent agreement up to 4 days.
I'm looking at tidbits right now. It actually has one for 0 hour right now.
Anything interesting?
Yes, the the HWRF model.
Apart from that, please.
Apart from that, a majority of the models projected around 105 knots at its peak, pushing 110, so around 120, 125 miles an hour before it makes landfall.
Alright, there is the 0 UTC models as well on my screen now. We'll update that on the page in just a few moments. So there is what it's looking like. I guess what the biggest change is really is that the level of agreement has decreased, I think, coming into this latest model run. You've got one model near the bottom there, can't quite tell which one it is. NGX2 takes it over Lake Okeechobee, and then further north you've got the GFS, which is the furthest north non-statistical model, which is pretty much a terrible situation for Jacksonville by the looks of it there on that GFS. And then a few right in the middle, like the National Hurricane Center. There's the intensity models for what they're saying on Dorian at 0 UTC. HWFI is just about reaching Category 5 status, but the rest of them are still way below Category 3. So a lot of people like to look at that, the outlier, and fail to see everything else on there that suggests that it won't get to that intensity. Not to say it definitely won't get to that intensity indeed, but the models aren't really on board with that so far. However, if the storm is intensifying a lot right now to 90 miles per hour, maybe even to higher than that by morning, take note, none of these models on this screen predict Dorian to be a Category 2 in 12 hours. So if it is, then all those models are wrong and will have to readjust for a higher intensity. So that's something we really need to bear in mind when we look at these as well. We will fix up that graphic very shortly indeed. But now let's go back to more imagery. This imagery updates all the time. Looks like there's a new convective burst that's just beginning right near the eye. This imagery, the last frame of that is 4 minutes old. So we're still seeing very recent imagery here of Dorian's progression, continuing to move away from the islands of Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands.
It seems like the convective burst, though, is on the western half, but
Yes.
the southeastern one is the one where we're kind of worried about.
Again, radar will tell us more than the satellites can, so if people keep sending in more radar loops for me, that would be great that we can show on the screen. Let's now
Sure can.
go back again to this other imagery, the geocolor. Again, you can see Dorian's progression in another light, or shade, as the case may be, when the light fades. Visible infrared hybrid imagery there that we're looking at, known as geocolor. On the top right is the water vapor, and on the bottom right is one of the infrared channels. I'm looking through our next section. The big picture there is the RGB air mass. It picks out the dry air as well. You can see quite a lot of that marked in the brownish colours. Top right is another variant there. And on the bottom right hand side was natural colour. Visible imagery, or of course none of which is available now because it is long past nightfall. But at the minute we're saying 80 miles an hour and a pressure of 990 millibars, and further intensification is possible or is occurring. The National Hurricane Center will have an update in just over half an hour. There were some questions. Let's see what we've got now. What about 13W? Good question. There is Tropical Storm Podul right now, which is 13W. Again, you can see those different looks of the different sets of imageries there too. Massive convection blowing up on the western side, some of it above minus 90 degrees Celsius. Massive cloud tops on the western side. It's blowing right into Vietnam. This is what we're concerned about more than anything, that convection moving in. Huge amounts of moisture, huge amounts of rainfall, could exceed 18 inches. That's 450 millimeters over the Indochina region. It is passing the center of the storm, is just about to pass south of Hainan Island right now in China, and will then move on to Vietnam, probably as a tropical depression later today, local time. There is another look from the Navy imagery of Dorian. That's quite out of date though. And again, that National Hurricane Center track forecast, which will change within the next hour. So again, the National Hurricane Center only expects a major hurricane on Saturday, but their whole forecast will have to change if the storm does indeed get to 90 miles per hour at this coming advisory, or if it gets to 100 miles per hour by tomorrow morning. Because the National Hurricane Center didn't predict either of those, I don't think, certainly not the former.
A few more questions that popped up. Will Dorian be a very deadly storm for Florida? I would say yes. Pretty much every single model brings it over Florida. The GFS model actually stalls it over Georgia, so maybe that would be a little bit of a concern too. But as of right now, almost all the statistical models bring it over Florida. So yes, I would be praying for Florida right now. And there was also a similar question to that. Will Florida get hurricane winds? Almost a guarantee at this point, yes.
Well, only 35% chance in various locations at the minute, but
well, it's long range, of course.
Certainly, and what you will find is that as you know, they're covering all bases, and the percentages as it narrows down, they will increase.
Of course, and we can't also forget that Dorian currently is a pretty compact storm, so only like a small percentage of the wind field right now is hurricane force wind.
And indeed, the southwestern side, not very much tropical storm force winds even.
Very true. Any other questions that we have? There was a question regarding the brown ocean effect from Matthew Smith, asking if a hurricane goes over a warm lake like the one in Florida, does it help the storm, or does it ease the weakening phase, I guess?
Yes. More of easing the weakening phase. But we've seen times before. Did Faye intensify over the lake?
It developed an eye, but it was never officially classified as a hurricane.
That one's up for debate. And the Okeechobee hurricane probably weakens more slowly because it moved over the lake too. More questions. Will Dorian go to Gulf of Mexico? Well, we look at the map there, and National Hurricane Center say a 60% chance tropical storm force winds on the Gulf of Mexico coast. As for its actual tracking over the Gulf, well, I would say at least a half chance.
There's a split in the models right now between the GFS
Yeah.
and ECMWF. Another question, do you think the NHC will go to 100 miles an hour at the 11 p.m. advisory?
No.
Currently, we just saw from the recon, I think someone said earlier that there was surface winds of around 100 miles an hour, but that hasn't been confirmed, so it's more likely 90 miles an hour if they decide to raise the intensity.
We could be wrong. They might put it up to 100.
We've seen worse from the NHC before.
Well, it might. You've got things that are within a respectable range. Anywhere
That's
from
very
85 to 100 at this update. I would go with 90.
Well, I mean, they did that, I think, with Joaquin and Michael initially, where they had reports of about 140 knots, but they decided not to upgrade it. So, I mean, the NHC can be a little iffy sometimes on how much they upgrade their storms.
Certainly. Let me reread some of the key messages here. The first one doesn't really matter now, apart from the last part. The storm could still produce flash flooding into the morning, but not dangerous winds. The risk of dangerous storm surge and hurricane force winds later this week and this weekend continues to increase in the central and northwestern Bahamas and along the Florida east coast, although it is too soon to determine where these hazards will occur. Residents in these areas should ensure they have their hurricane plan in place and not focus on the exact forecast track of Dorian's center. Heavy rains are expected to occur over portions of the Bahamas, Florida, and elsewhere in the southeastern United States later this week and into early next week. From what we've seen in stores, people have really been going to town on the preparation front, with empty shelves reported in some stores, according to David, with some news earlier. Ethan,
That's
do you
a
have
good thing,
anything
though.
for us? Yeah, sure. As long as everyone's got it, anyway.
True.
Still waiting on the recon update.
Gotcha.
Oh,
Recon is heading towards the southwestern side of the
Yeah.
storm.
I'm keeping my eye out for the
Isn't the
next
the
NHC
strongest part
update.
is the western part, though, isn't it? I don't think it's southwestern.
Here's some
Because
recent
convection bursts.
satellite imagery now that we're looking on the screen. An interesting little burst right around the eye. You can really tell where the eye is based on that convective burst. It's swept round the western side
part.
of the Eyewall. But again, I'm still very curious about what appears to be dry air entrainment on the eastern side there, and what will happen there. It's almost splitting the thing into two.
If convection wraps around the whole entire hurricane, I don't think dry air is going to affect it that much, if at all. So I think that's what Dorian is trying to do right now, especially with that convective burst on the western side.
Here's an interesting question. Can we trust radar velocity for wind speeds in hurricanes? From what I've never really researched this very much, but from what I've seen others post in the past, I think not.
No, because velocity typically is used during severe weather to detect rotation up in a storm. And it'll only detect winds aloft, not at the ground.
Right.
So if you use velocity on like a minimal category 5 hurricane, you might find velocity ratings of 175, 180. But in reality, it's only 160 because it's onto the surface.
Yeah, if the 1 minute sustained winds are taken at, I think, 33, it's either 33 meters or 33 feet. So you won't actually feel it on the ground.
But there we are again with that satellite imagery, and we'll continue to check back with that every few minutes because it is evolving very quickly, and we get satellite image updates every few minutes, every minute even at times. Again, with some of those floater images there, you can see again the larger scale and larger time scale as well, the progression of Dorian. And there again is Tropical Storm Podul in the Western Pacific, the South China Sea. The National Hurricane Center will update hopefully in the next 30 minutes, possibly less. So as soon as we know, we'll let you know what the situation is with Dorian according to them, and whether they issue any more warnings, whether any of the governments have issued any more warnings. I don't think they'll issue any watches for the Bahamas yet, probably tomorrow.
We have a question from Cyclone Freak asking if the NHC has Dorian at 90 for 11. He's asking if Category 4 chances go to 25 to 30%. Any thoughts on that?
Can't tell you yet.
That's what I'm thinking. To Cyclone Freak, I would say there's a chance of Cat 4, but there's only one model that realistically does that, and that unfortunately is the HWRF model. So if we're going by the models right now, most of them bring it to about 120, 125 miles an hour. Anything can change though. Overnight, who knows? Dorian could explode and become like a Cat 3 already by early morning. But considering what we're looking at right now, we have to trust the models right now as of 0 time, and they currently, most of them bring it to about 120 miles. So, I mean, like I said, anything can happen, but we're basing our predictions based on the models that we have for the most recent run.
I can now tell you that the center of Hurricane Dorian is 81 miles from San Juan, Puerto Rico, and obviously it's moving further away at this point. Just to give you
Is it moving north still?
Location reference, the current position estimate is 19.6 north, 66.0 west. So that means that in the last, this isn't official by the way, but in the last 5.5 hours, the storm has moved 0.8 degrees north and 0.5 degrees west. So it is moving more north than it is west at the minute.
That's quite interesting.
And that means
Yeah,
that it is
aircraft.
moving more north of forecast.
The aircraft reconnaissance plane is now over Puerto Rico. Might be going in for another pass, maybe soon.
They'll
Well,
have to
12's
step
been
on
out
it.
for a while.
Sorry?
I said 12 has been out for quite a bit.
Hmm.
They've been out for quite a few hours, so maybe they're going to send 13 over very soon. Who knows?
All right then.
We got a very interesting question from Iodine Pie. He asked, why do typhoons seem to generally have lower pressure than hurricanes in comparison to their wind speed?
Yeah, we discussed this last time we streamed. I can't remember last time we streamed now. I think it was 2 nights ago. And there are a few reasons why they tend to have lower pressures than the Atlantic. Atlantic tends to have the highest pressures out of any of the Northern Hemisphere basins, really. The storms tend to be smaller. The Western Pacific storms are usually much larger. And smaller storms tend to have higher pressures. And also tend to have higher pressures for the actual wind speeds than they would in the Western Pacific, say. For instance, earlier today, Dorian had 75-mile-an-hour winds and a pressure of 996, and Podul had a pressure of 996 as well, and wind speeds of 40 miles an hour. Remarkable how contrasting they were. Pressure inside the same intensity, inside a storm of the same strength, can also vary in terms of the storm's latitude. the storm's size, and there was another one that I can't actually remember, but environmental pressures as well in the region can also have an impact.
That's a very good take.
Yeah, those things really, pretty much. I'm just still somewhat mesmerized by looking at this imagery over and over, updating every minute as well of the Ghost 16 of Hurricane Dorian. You can still see that burst of convection, which appears to be expanding now after it ripped round the western side of the eye. And I just wonder what might happen next with that. But a nice little burst of convection there, which is reaffirming that central core, as I think it needed to, because the convection was really waning before that little burst came through.
It'll be interesting to see if that convection actually expands and spreads out, especially into the eastern quadrant of the storm, where it's a little weaker.
Well, it needs to do something about that massive gap that's breaking through now, almost cutting the storm in half.
Mm-hmm.
Which I can only conclude is from dry air intrusion. There's a new frame there wrapping all around the south side now as well. Will it make it all the way to the eastern side? Alright, let's see if we have any more questions. You can start your message with Force 13 all in text. In fact, we'll take your questions in a little while. First, we're going to take a break for a few moments. Won't be too long. We'll be back in a little while and we'll talk about the latest. And we'll get that National Hurricane Center update. But in the meantime, to remind you, all the warnings were lifted ages ago. And we think Dorian is intensifying, likely to reach Category 3 status as it approaches Florida this weekend. The track can still change quite considerably yet, as will its intensity forecast too, I should imagine. The chances of a stronger storm are rising, that's why we're here covering it tonight. And we'll be back in just a few moments. Force 13 Live, this is Hurricane Dorian on your screen right now as we look at it live. This is pretty much right the way up to date as of 29 minutes past, so actually 6 minutes old, which is the oldest, most out of date we've seen it so far. It's been 2 and 3 minutes old generally, but there we go, not too bad still. Convection blowing up around the eye of the storm right now, and one or two of our members suggesting off air that it could reach category 3 by morning. Any thoughts on that, guys?
I would support that.
I would too. I would agree with David completely. Category 3, I'd almost argue, is likely this pace in the morning because the storm might even be close to reaching category 2 at this point by recon with 85 knot winds. That would indeed make it a cat 2.
I think it depends on how well the convection wraps around the center. If it's able to completely wrap around and like centralize the eye, then yeah, I think a Cat 3 is extremely likely by early morning.
What I always see in storms that are forecast to become Cat 3s, Cat 3, Cat 4s, and Cat 5s, for some reason it always seemed like it to me that storms always get through the Category 2 range relatively with ease.
I noticed that too. Typically, from what I noticed, with like especially with Eastern Pacific hurricanes and the typhoons, is that they would intensify rapidly, and then they would take like a pause or break at Cat 3, and then they would intensify a bit quicker after that pause. So it's kind of like a stepstone thing.
Well, Category 2 range is 96 miles per hour to 110. If I'm not mistaken, is the shortest range out of any of them.
It's the smallest one, I think, yeah.
So that might have something to do with it, maybe.
Category 3 is very similar in size, though.
It's another small one, yeah. I think Category 2 and 3 get through quite quickly, in my experience. Anyway, we're still watching that convective blow up. It looks like it's starting to fizzle out now, so it's really pushing out and expanding rather than lifting. So it really hit the western southwestern side of the eye wall. It's the black area there surrounding the eye. The eye is there somewhere. You can pretty much see it, except you can't. The eye is underneath all of that, but the black circling blow up is a dead giveaway as to where the eye is. National Hurricane Center will update at some point in the next 20 minutes or so, and we'll give you the very latest as soon as they do update it, any new information and the forecast and expected impacts. Before we do get that update, I guess we've just got an open floor for 20 minutes, guys, if you want to discuss anything right now.
Well, we can discuss an advisory just came out. Erin, somehow it's still tropical.
Oh, man.
Erin!
How is it still tropical?
It's supposed to be dead now. So the advisory's out on Erin. Hanging on, they say. 35 mile an hour winds, 1005 millibars. Well, that was against
even
all
1 millibar.
It was against all the odds, wasn't it?
Is it just me, or on the radar, Dorian doesn't look as great as previous images?
Well, I've not seen the radar, but I assume it's starting to leave the scope of Federico.
So the advisory on Erin that was just released had a pressure of 1005 millibars.
Yeah, I'm sure they'll have a lot of fun writing the discussion of that update.
Well, the advisory on Dorian is out. Hurricane hunters find Dorian intensifying.
85 miles per hour and a pressure of 986. What's rather odd is that the public advisory has come out before the forecast advisory, which is quite rare. And they are still expecting a 100 knot peak, which is 115 miles per hour. So really, there isn't very much change at all to the forecast, which I thought there might have been. and the up in intensity isn't as much as we probably thought either. They've really gone the lower bound of what we think it might be. 85 miles an hour, mid-range category 1 now, pressure 986 millibars. So that is the latest news from the National Hurricane Center. What else do we have on there? They've not issued any warnings. Hurricane force winds extend out 15 miles. Tropical storm force winds going out 70 miles. Expected to dump 2 to 4 inches of rain over the central Bahamas, isolated amounts of 6 inches. The northern Bahamas and coastal sections of the southeast United States, 4 to 8 inches, they're still saying, with isolated amounts to 10. So really the main course of their expectations of hazards, they haven't come out with it yet. They're not really saying anything about storm surge or expected wind impacts because it is too early to tell still at this point. And that's why we are also going to be finishing our coverage shortly, in about 20 minutes time.
The breaking news: we had the new public advisory is
We just
now
had that.
out. The new forecast.
We're not paying attention. We just had that. That's what I was literally
85
reading.
miles an hour as predicted.
Nathan, would you say that Dorian does 90 miles per hour right now?
Probably. And as soon as the National Hurricane Center release their new map, we'll show it to you. I really doubt it will have changed very much.
Here's a
Nathan.
question.
I have the new cone.
Go
I'll
on.
post it in the live room.
Quick question for everyone in our discussion. Considering that Dorian is a fairly packed storm, and after reading the discussion where it says like it's 29 degrees Celsius, a pretty moist air mass and low shear, do you think that maybe 115 is a little bit of an understatement? Or do you think that they're kind of keeping it, that's kind of right to keep it there at 115? Because historically, more compact storms
I would have made it
tend to
120.
Intensify. That's what I was thinking.
Same.
120 for peak?
Yeah,
At
120
the moment, here is the latest forecast track. Now, for those who saw the last one, it almost looks identical, really. But that is the latest update at 11 PM Atlantic Standard Time, which is also Eastern Daylight Time.
No,
Forecast
that last point looks to be pretty close to Orlando.
I think it's over Orlando, actually.
But it was very close to their last time.
It was to the south of there last time.
Yes, what you'll also notice is that the cone, just about eliminating the Florida Keys completely now. The very upper Keys were still in that cone at the last advisory. But now they're not.
But it shifted a little bit closer to Savannah, Georgia in
Yes.
this update.
The latest day 5 point is just to the west of Orlando.
All
And
right.
is that cone tracked? Sorry, Nathan. Is the cone tracked further out into the Gulf of Mexico?
Well, we really know with an idea if Dorian's going to go into the Gulf of Mexico really probably begin tomorrow when the National Hurricane Center forecasts such. But until then, I'm not sure.
So, a reminder of the update. The National Hurricane Center is saying that the storm now has winds of 85 miles per hour and a pressure of 986.
I would have gone higher personally.
I would have taken 90. I think 90 could have been reasonable.
So, what do we do next?
I think we can leave the last 16 minutes to questions. I mean, if anyone in the chat has questions, like last minute questions, I think we would be happy to answer them. Because we will be
Well,
going
there's
off in
one.
about
Category
16
3
minutes, I think.
tomorrow, question mark. There's a question. Some
Wow.
people in our team think so, yeah.
I think so.
I think it will happen.
Yeah, it could. It could if it ends up proving to actually be rapidly intensifying. I'm not sure if that's actually been confirmed yet, but yeah, it all depends.
I don't know about early morning, but I think eventually within the day, yes, it could. It probably will hit Cat 3.
And there again is some more infrared imagery. Do you think Podul could have a life in the North Indian Ocean? I think HWRF wanted it, unsurprisingly.
It's true.
Do you think Dorian is going to reach Category 4? Again, we've had that question about 15 or 20 times in the last 6 hours. The chances are increasing. We're still giving it 20% at the moment. Could Dorian be another Katrina? Of course. No. No, I don't think so.
Well, according to the most recent models, no. There's still a chance, a very slim one, though.
Will we be streaming tomorrow is a question that I've been given there as well. I'm not sure what our schedule looks like tomorrow. I believe that Tim is working on a standard update on Dorian as we speak, and will be uploaded pretty soon. So stay tuned on the Force 13 channel here on YouTube and also on Facebook. If you're watching there, videos get uploaded rather regularly. Like our pages, subscribe to us as well. You'll get the very latest information. And hopefully some good analysis too.
Here's an
well,
interesting question. Someone asked, why do newly developed or developing cyclones weaken more slower and less on land than older and fully developed storms?
Not always the case. It really depends on the circumstances. I mean, the bigger storms, I don't know whether this is true or not, but when you think about the strongest storms, they seem to hit areas of land that have more hills, basically.
Especially in Latin America.
Yes, so you think about the United States, the southeast of the US, it's mostly flat. And you don't get Category 5s as often, or Category 4s for Florida, as you do down in the Caribbean, where there are massive mountains and hills all over the place on these islands. And the Hispaniola kill storms. A better example, perhaps, is the Western Pacific, where all of these storms go and hit the Philippines and hit Taiwan. And maybe they are so hilly because of over millions of years of so many strong typhoons hitting them or something. I don't know. No, it's not really that, is it? The Pacific Ring of Fire. Anyway, we've got just over 10 minutes to run here as we continue to watch Dorian. Whether it's intensifying substantially or not remains a bit of an uncertain question.
I do just want to point out, in addition to video updates being released, do look for cones and tropical weather outlooks on our social media outlets as well. I'm probably going to be releasing one or maybe even another tomorrow. I'll just see what I do.
And
Also,
again, I'm not sure.
Go ahead, Nathan.
I'm not sure what our live streaming schedule will be tomorrow, but we'll of course let everyone know as soon as we have a schedule in place. What we tend to do is we watch what happens and then we go live in the evenings usually. We were thinking of maybe starting up 24/7 coverage. That will happen at some point if the storm keeps going as it is, but it isn't affecting any land areas at the minute, so we will probably revert to some smaller scale updates in the next 24 hours, maybe up to 48 hours, and then we'll really be ramping things up again. Go ahead.
I would just like to point out for all the viewers watching, for those who are predicting a category 4 or a 5, especially a category 5, do not pay attention to those at the moment because only one model, the HWRF model, predicts a category 5, and historically this year it has performed god awful at intensity prediction. So try not to pay attention to that. I would focus more on the ship's model, which the NHC cites almost every discussion, and that currently brings the peak intensity around 120 miles an hour as zero time. Also, another thought is when paying attention to the forecast track on the NHC, please be aware that the 5-day cone, the average error is about 200 miles. So even if you're not directly in the center of the forecast track, please still take caution, especially for those in Florida, because we currently do have a split in the models. We have one model, the GFS model, taking Dorian over Jacksonville and stalling it over Georgia, and then we have the European model that cuts through Florida around Orlando and then takes a path similar to Hurricane Andrew into the Alabama, Mississippi coast. So even if you're not directly in the center of the cone, please still do take caution.
What I will say, what you said about the HWRF, yes, it has overestimated all the intensities typically this year, but all major, well, pretty much all major cyclones, almost all of them, the HWRF has nailed this year. It nailed Wu Tip, it nailed Veronica in the southern hemisphere, and it nailed Barbara almost in the East Pacific this year, so it could be doing the same for Dorian.
It could be, but it could also be coincidence at the same time.
Yes, but historically it hasn't been the most reliable.
I would say it's the most aggressive, but if it gets it right, it gets it right. Because historically, the ship's model, while it's efficient, it also tends to underestimate stronger storms.
Yeah, it's just a more conservative.
But that's what the NHC likes. They love more conservative models than the more aggressive ones like the HWRF. That's why I think with Michael, when Michael was approaching the coast and it was pretty obvious that it was going to be really strong, they still had the peak around like 1, even though it pretty much was 140 at that advisory. So they love being conservative on their predictions.
Alright, some questions. Do you think rapid intensification could occur tonight or early tomorrow morning, and what are the chances? Well, who knows, it might be happening right now. What do you think is the risk for Tallahassee, Florida? Slowly rising, but still fairly low at the moment, at least in the next 5 days. I don't think we can be drawn to comment beyond 5 days. Was the reason why the storm is only 85 miles per hour because of the dry air? Well,
no, because of Recon.
Well, yes. Well, no, Recon got. I don't understand that one. I mean, I've not seen that Recon report with my own eyes, but I'm taking what you've said, Ethan. You said 85 knots, which is 100 miles an hour on the ground. If it's 10-second winds, then it's probably around 90 miles an hour.
Yep, that would be the case.
So that stumped me more than anything else this hour, really.
Yeah. From what I'm seeing on satellite imagery, it appears that Dorian might be going through an Eyewall replacement, possible Eyewall replacement cycle, because it's a little disorganized and it's not really showing that clear eye that it was showing earlier. So it's likely to be replacing it with a new one.
On radar, you say?
Yes.
So that's what we're seeing.
As well as
Does
on the
anyone have
Go
a-
16 on the shortwave.
Well, you can't see an eye on Go 16 right now. Can anyone show us that radar before we run out of time?
I sure can.
That would be very useful for us all.
Oh, the eye looks to be very cloud filled. Really looks to be very precipitation filled in radar now.
So if that is actually the case, it's you're almost done.
All right. Well, I'm just waiting to see that radar imagery. Let's go back to the satellite then. There it is once more. You can see how that convection has been evolving and starting to diminish now as it continues to expand and disperse. Oh dear, oh dear. Here's the radar image. Ah, what on earth happened? So
Looks like dry air got in there.
yeah, that dry slot that was on the southeastern side has crept round now and has gotten all the way to the eye via the northeastern side now. And oh dear, Dorian's got a problem.
He appears to be having a dry air invasion.
Yeah.
Now this could change things, and this could bring back the National Hurricane Center's forecast into more the realms of possibility of being correct, because this might favor a slower intensification phase now. Still
That's
early
worrying,
days.
because that basically discredits the HWRF model at this point, if that's the case. And I'm
Almost
sure it's
looks
still
like-
going to be quite aggressive.
Still early days on that.
Almost
we'll
has
see.
a. No, I know this is a little unrelated, but it kind of does have a little bit of a supercell shape and slight, little resemblance of one.
This could ultimately delay its rapid intensification phase, if it even has one. It could delay it.
It could still, even if it did, it'd still be. We're still looking at a potential major hurricane landfall.
People want us to elaborate about the dry air.
Well, I guess I can zoom out a little bit on that radar imagery and explain that a little bit
For
better.
those who don't know, dry air is terrible for hurricanes because they are machines of moisture and heat and energy, and dry air is extremely
A
boring,
hurricane's
I
worst
suppose.
nightmare.
I think now would be a good time to look for water vapor. Look for some water vapor imagery.
Or precipitable water. I'd like to see.
Yes. Yeah,
see
that would
that
be a
one.
good. That would be
Ah.
a good map to pull up right now.
Nathan,
Well, speaking of time, we're about to run out. Yes.
Yeah.
I was gonna say before we go, I
Yes.
just got news that the zero time for the ECMWF model just came out.
Oh, that'll take some while yet, though, won't it?
Oh, actually, it's full. It's completely updated. It's all the way at 240 hours.
Really? What have they
Right.
got? Quickly.
They do not have it hooking towards Alabama and Mississippi anymore. They actually have it kind of hitting the same place where Michael and Hermine hit.
No.
Now.
Oh.
Yeah,
What
it takes
intensity?
the
Any
storm-
idea?
Right now it says 979 millibars from what I'm looking at. So the path hits it around West Palm Beach, takes it straight through Tampa, and then curls up towards Panama City. And then it emerges it passes over Georgia, around Savannah, and then it emerges from the Atlantic Ocean and intensifies again.
Alright, well, this concludes our 6 hours of coverage tonight on Force 13 Live. We've been here for the whole duration. If you enjoyed our coverage tonight, thank you very much for joining us. And if it's your first time, we hope you come back very soon. We'll be running more coverage throughout the life of Hurricane Dorian, as we do all the time with all the big hurricanes, and this could be another one now. Until then, stay up to date on the outlets on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and everything else that we do. All the links you need are underneath the video right now on Facebook and Twitter, where we've been simulcasting this live stream tonight. We've also got our Discord server too, and you can communicate with other people on there as and when as well. I'm sure we're back with more coverage tomorrow and plenty other recorded videos too as this storm progresses. We'll see you again soon. Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, everybody. Stay safe.
Yeah.